Totally appreciate it. Come on in. I'm Abby Corso. I'm with Elevate. We're a nonprofit focused on climate equity and actually working in buildings to do upgrades. And I'm here with Susan Millar, who is the star of the show today. Susan is the co-leader of the Community Climate Solutions team at 350 Madison, and she's also a senior scientist emeritus from UW-Madison. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about her background because she's going to talk about it, and she's going to give us some great information and really kind of talk about her experience in electrifying her home, her 90-year-old home here in Madison, Wisconsin. So come on in as if you're going to stay. We want a couple of takeaways that we all want you to leave with is we want you to understand that this is an old home and that, you know, an all electric conversion is possible in an older home. Patience and persistence is what gets it done. It works. And, you know, we want you to all feel like if you can be an early adopter, we can move this market and we can really affect climate change. And then there are some public policy like questions and issues that we can hopefully touch on at the end. So hopefully those are some takeaways you'll all leave with. And Susan, I just want you to maybe talk a little bit about yourself and then give us a few minutes of why you thought this was important to do in your home.
Well, let's see, I am a person who has 5 grandchildren. And that always makes me kind of tear up because I'm a person who's really worried about their future. Not just my grandchildren, but all of our grandchildren. In fact, our children. So for the last, I don't know, maybe since I was Alex's age here, I've been aware that climate change was going to be a big issue. And when I retired some 7 or 8 years ago, I became more and more engaged. And about 2 or 3 years ago, well, about 5 or 6 years ago, I joined 350 Madison and then recently became very involved. And the more so I read about this stuff all the time and I understand it. And over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, in this house, which was built in 1932, I was like, oh God, I really hate it when that gas furnace comes on, because I can just feel the carbon going into the atmosphere. And so I was turning my house down really low and I was getting cold. And finally I was like, well, you know what? If I electrify this house so that I'm not using fossil gas, I can make the house a little warmer. And so that was one of the reasons I decided to do that. And the other reason is because I can. I have enough retirement income that I can be an early adopter in terms of the upfront costs. And I realize that not everybody is going to be able to do that. And following on Abby's point, you know, that there's some big policy issues. We really need to be able to get the kind of rebates going, the policy measures in place that enables this kind of transition to occur for a lot of people. And I also think that as more and more people do this, prices will come down. That's a standard sort of thing. And along these lines, I also want to just give a huge shout out to Saul Griffith, who is the author of the recently published book called Electrify, an optimist playbook for how we can beat global warming. Saul makes the point that if we will just stop buying gas-powered devices in our homes, if we replace everything, when it comes time to replace your furnace or your water heater or whatever, if you replace with an air source heat pump, and if you don't buy a gas stove, but you buy an induction stove, then that's going to push the market, because the fossil gas is just going to start being used less. so that whole idea of electrifying everything has just like been on my mind a lot. And so I decided to do it. And it kind of started with, maybe we should turn up to the next slide. Whoops. Oh yeah. Okay. This is a good place. It kind of started with my decision with, okay. There was 100-year-old silver maple that was shading my backyard, and the neighbors cut it down because it was about to fall. And suddenly I could get solar. And so I did. And here's a picture of the folks putting solar on the roof. That happened in August of 2020. And so then I had solar, and you know, there's this deal with Madison Gas and Electric that if you don't use all the solar that you're producing, they'll pay you for it at market rate, which is a really great deal here in Madison. Not everybody gets that. But there's another deal, whereas if you produce too much solar, more solar than you're using for up to 3 years, they'll stop doing that. And so I was like, I got to use more electricity, because I was selling a lot of electricity to MG&E. And so that was another reason I was like, well, how am I going to use more electricity? Oh, I'll get rid of the gas furnace. So that kind of got me onto the path of wanting to do that. And so I started working on figuring out how to do that in the spring and summer of 21. And that's when I contacted a bunch of HVAC people in the Madison area. I interviewed 3, and then I gave up. Each of those 3 wonderful guys, and I really want to basically give a shout out to all the contractors I worked with. They all were like, yes, lady, we can put in an air source heat pump that will heat your house to plus 14 degrees. And then you can use your gas furnace as a backup. And I was like, hi, I want to get rid of the gas furnace. I'm going to turn it off. So eventually I was fortunate enough to find a way to Midwest Heating in Milwaukee. And there's one of their directors is here today, Bailey. And they were like, sure, we can do that. We've got a Mitsubishi P system, which will take your house down to minus 14 before the backup electric resistance coils kick in. And I was like, oh, that's the outside unit.
Yeah.
And so I was like, sold. And then, you know, it took me a while to sort through various things with them. And they were just incredible. And so this baby was installed in August of 21. And so then I was getting going on getting the air source water heater to replace my gas burner water heater. And that took a little while. And again, it was not easy to find the contractor, but finally I found a local contractor to do that. And so that was installed also in September. And oh, I forgot to say that back in, I guess it was in February, I have a very fancy gas stove with an electric oven. And I was like, I'm gonna not use gas in this stove. And I bought these little two burner induction stovetop things from Home Depot for $170 a piece. And got 2 of them. So I had 4 induction burners. I just plugged them into my 120s and started cooking with induction. And the minute I did that, I could feel the difference in the room. I mean, when you stop having, gas flames in your kitchen, it actually matters. You can smell it, and it's so much easier to clean. Oh my gosh. So, so those were the 3 things I had to get rid of: the gas stove, gas water heater, and gas furnace. And by the time I was done in September, the weather was so great that I didn't even need to turn on the air source heat pump. And then I didn't have to turn it on in October. But I finally turned it on in November as it started to get cold. And I'm pleased to say that we've had 2 episodes of -8 and -10 here in Madison recently. Not a problem. I mean, this air source heat pump is just perfect. It didn't even, I would go down in the morning and check to see whether the elements, the electric resistance elements came on, and they didn't. So it's working really great. And maybe what we could do is turn to the next.
You want to talk? So, so this is, do you want to talk through this slide, Susan? This is the costs of the whole system. And Susan was really kind enough to share the, her costs to do this in her home. And you can see the progression from the solar to the transition to heat pumps.
Yeah, I want to make clear that, first of all, if you are living in a home where you cannot have solar panels, or in say a condo or something, obviously you're not going to get solar panels. And when I got the solar panels, I didn't realize that I was going to go with an air source heat pump. So I'm sort of separating that cost out, and focus on energy, and the federal government give you tax credits and rebates. So that helps. Thanks. And then then there's this question of right, as Abby said, there are a lot of steps. So when I first got started on this idea, I was like, okay, I need to do a home energy analysis to find out what kind of leakiness this old house has. It had good windows and good siding, but it turns out that there was absolutely no insulation in the attic or in that section that attaches the house to the basement. So a really great guy came out and did the energy analysis with a blower test and all that. And then he was like, this is a pretty leaky house. And so that's when I hired the insulation folks. And they treated my house like it was their own. It was amazing what they did, because they have all these funny little gables and stuff like that. And they had to get in there and do all that. Newer houses are so much easier. So that was a pretty big expense. If your house is well insulated, you're obviously not going to have to incur that expense. So that's why I put it as prep. That's not the actual electrification. It's the prep for the electrification. Insulating your home is generally speaking an expensive thing, and you should do it anyway, even if you can't switch out of your gas furnace, because you're going to save a lot of heat. My house is so much more comfortable, and I could feel it in the summer. The house was just holding the cool all day long without AC. And so then we move into the expenses associated with actually electrifying the 3 gas devices that I had, and you can see those there. Right. So the total in my case was $18,600. It's a big upfront cost, but to me it was worth it, because I just love living in this house. And I have to tell you one more story. September 1, I called Madison Gas and Electric and I said, please turn off my gas. And they were like, pardon? Are you moving? And I said, no, I'm just not going to be using gas anymore. And that confused them. They got my bill wrong in September, and then we had to redo it because they still charged me for the gas thing, which is what, $22 a month base charge. But then they finally sorted that out. So anyway, if we go to the next slide, this is the really fun slide. So back in 2019, this house cost me, $2,200 from Madison Gas and Electric. In 2020, things didn't really change until I got the solar panels, and you can see that there was something big happened with the solar panels. And then we went through winter of 2021, and over the course of the summer, we had a good summer, and I was selling so much solar back to MG&E that I wasn't really paying them much of anything. And then with the fossil gas shut off in September, they actually paid me in October. And then you can see my costs going into this winter with running the air source heat pump and the water heater and the induction stove. So I'm not going to say that I'm going to make this money back like tomorrow. Obviously, I'm not. But I've got the pleasure of living in a house that I feel really happy about. And the other thing I feel really happy about is that I feel like I'm able to kind of move help push the market, help folks like you all know, look, we can do this. And so that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Susan. That's just an incredible journey. And thank you for sharing your MG&E bills also, which is incredibly, incredibly, graceful of you. We wanted to kind of talk about the micro, so like this experience, and really show like what it looks like from a cost standpoint, but also, just from a, bill saving standpoint. But I also mentioned there's a macro picture here, and why it's really important, to highlight stories like Susan's, and the fact that she did it pretty much on her own, and then found contractors to do the work on her own. And so there's, an importance in being an early adopter. And then there's also some policy and incentives. And I'm going to go back to the slide before, and, so we can maybe talk about that, but maybe just talk a little bit about your, your feelings about being an early adopter and how this can really, move the market for electrification.
Well, so truth be told, it took a lot of time. Actually, I left out the fact that I started by looking at ground source heat pumps. I mean, a ground source heat pump, which would have meant that people with big drills came into my yard and put in, dug up the ground and all the rest of this. That took about a month or two before I decided, no, that's not going to work. There's no way, given the size of my yard, that I'm going to be able to do that. And so then that's when I started the search for the company that would install the air source heat pumps. And again, I kept a list of the emails associated with all the people I contacted. It's a long list. And so, and eventually I find, like I said, I found Midwest. And then the search for the, meanwhile, I was doing the home energy analysis and finding the insulation contractors and getting that done. And then I start looking for the water heater guy. And early on, I figured out the induction thing. So I would say maybe, I spent probably 100 hours all told by the time I was done finding all these contractors and working with them. And I just want to say that I am so pleased with the people I worked with. And going to your point, Abby, about pushing the market, every one of those contractors, and I have a list here if anybody's interested, is helping to push the market. There are so many HVAC people that if you call them, they'll say, sure, I'll come by and give you a new gas furnace. They don't even have air source heat pumps on hand. So unless we start saying, sorry, if necessary, I'll go to Milwaukee in order to get an air source heat pump that will take me down to -14, then they're going to just they're not going to be pushed. So we have to push them. We have to push the market. We have to make clear that we are not going to be satisfied with yet another gas appliance in our homes. So that kind of goes back to Saul Griffith's point about electrify everything. So yeah, it did take a lot of time. I had to take records, keep track of everything and so forth, but piece by piece, bit by bit, it worked out great.
We're going to just hold questions for one more minute. And then also just with respect to questions, the organizers are asking that if you have the Hoover app to put them through the app, or we have cards rather than kind of having a dialogue.
And that's because it's being recorded and people are watching online.
And we want people to hear also. But just with respect to the incentives, you did get some focus incentives, but any thoughts on just like the policy and incentive structure and maybe how it would have helped you more kind of in this process?
That's totally correct. The decision to go with with the panels, there was that 24% tax credit that the federal government has, and I just put on that slide. Currently, it's 26% for this year if you go with solar, but it's going down, and unless we get something new passed at the federal level, there will be no tax credit for solar installation after 23. So that would be terrible. We really need to have major support for installing solar. And I want to give a shout out to Renew. Actually, they have a couple of solar programs that help reduce the cost as well right here in the state. The focus on energy incentive is also good, although that is going down. I contacted the guy I worked with at Full Spectrum recently, and he said that due to the huge increase in the number of installations they're doing, that the focus on energy rebate has gone down to $500 because they just, there just isn't enough money in focus on energy to do the 1,500 that I got. So those incentives really are very important. Thank you, Abby.
Yeah.
I want to say with respect to focus on energy that I did not understand at the beginning that if you want to get other rebates, for example, for your air source heat pump or your water heater, and I'm not even sure that hybrid water heaters get rebates at this point, that you have to work with one of their allies. And so you have to go to the Focus on Energy website and find an ally who works with Focus on Energy. They know how to submit the rebate paperwork and so forth through Focus on Energy. And Focus on Energy is good. Hopefully it'll get even better. And along those lines, I want to say that there's a bunch of us in 350 Madison and Renew and other organizations across the state are very interested in pushing Focus on Energy to start paying more attention, not just to energy efficiency, but also to equity and making sure that that energy efficiency on low income and housing becomes a bigger issue for them. They have programs that address that problem. It's a big problem. If you have a really leaky house and a gas furnace, you're going to be paying a really, really high energy burden. And people are, it's ridiculous how little I'm paying in this beautiful house. And so I'm really lucky. Not everybody is. So I think, federal policies and state policies are just really, really important for helping to push this market, because most people aren't going to be able to lay out the money that I did. And also, I think that if you work with a Focus on Energy ally, it would also be easier. It might be easier to get through the logistics of some of this stuff, easier than what I did, because I didn't know. I didn't know, for example, to get a Focus on Energy ally to help insulate my house. So I didn't get a rebate for that. Oh, no, actually I did. That's true. Sorry. And that's because my home energy analyst knew how to do it. So that was, so that was great.
Cool. Thank you. We have about 15 or so minutes left in the session. We have a couple of questions. The first, this one actually came in last night. I was really impressed. We got a question. When you shut off the gas connection, did your connection charge go away?
Yes, it did.
And it felt great.
Yes, and there is a little piece to that. I kind of checked in when I was figuring out, should I really try this backup thing, and just go with the local air source heat pump. And so it turns out that Madison Gas and Electric, if you ask them to shut off your gas, and then let's say I'm doing that in July, and then there's a cold snap in January, and I call them up and I say, I'd like you to turn my gas back on. They will charge you for 12 months of gas service, not for one. They'll charge you for 12 months. It's a 12-month deal. So bear in mind that 22 times 12 as an additional thing if you're going to use gas as a backup.
Thank you. So the next question is, what electrification and solar options exist for renters?
Oh boy, that's a tough one.
I'm happy to take this one, Susan.
Yeah,
since-
please.
Since that's kind of our sweet spot at Elevate is working with the rental, the low income rental community. Unfortunately, it's really dependent on the building owner to do those type of upgrades on the buildings. So all of these options do exist, but it really has to come from the owner versus the renter. A lot of the work that we're doing now around solar is rooftop solar and metering and kind of connecting it directly to resident meters so that if an owner is willing to put solar on their building and connect it directly to resident meters, the residents will actually get the full benefit of the solar. Rather than the solar just maybe covering the common area meter, which is like the hallways or parking area lighting. So we're working on some demonstrations with using that model. And I would just say on the electrification side, when you're electrifying rental properties, most of our rental properties actually don't have air conditioning. So you're actually adding a load. You're adding a cooling load with electrification. Cooling's super important. So, but because you are adding that load, sometimes bills can go up. So we're also working with owners on how do we mitigate that and how do we work with especially low income renters so that their bills don't go up with electrification and they're getting the full benefit of an electrification, which for many renters, it's, getting rid of gas. And in many cases, that's improving indoor air quality, but also providing cooling. So they don't either have to use a window unit or have no cooling at all.
Well,
Okay.
actually, I'd like to just add something. I didn't mention that maybe not everybody knows that when you have an air source heat pump, you don't need a separate unit that acts as an air conditioner. Air source heat pumps go both ways. So when it comes time to take the hot air in your house and put it to the outside, you just flip a switch. And then all the rest of the time, believe it or not, these air source heat pumps exchange air with the outside and they bring heat into your house. So it's one unit. And the cost of air source heat pump cooling is substantially lower than regular electrical air conditioning. So again, that's something to bear in mind.
Another question for someone who might not know the first thing about electrifying their home, what's the best way they can start?
Well, I guess I would say, well, one thing you can do is you can read the blog that I wrote, which is up on the Renew website. It's the November blog up on the Renew Wisconsin website. I wrote that precisely because people were asking me about that, and because I wanted to explain, that it is a long process, that it takes, that you have to really pay attention first to whether your area is efficient, if it's well insulated, and then you have to go through these various steps. Finding good contractors is really ask around, check in with Focus on Energy to see if they have allies that will work with you on that. I wish I'd done that. I probably would have still found Midwest. And I really would encourage anybody who goes through this process, if you're talking with a local person who won't give you something that goes down to -14, tell them that, you're going to keep looking until you find something like that, because that will get them going. But there is one more thing I just should mention. And that is that right now, the Midwest area is experiencing sourcing issues with respect to things like the Mitsubishi P. I remember back in like June or July, Brent Chernuski at Midwest called me up and said, "Susan, I found a Mitsubishi P. It's the last one they're going to deliver to this area before January 22. But that's crazy that, there was only one Mitsubishi P that he could find in the summer of 21. It's not that Mitsubishi isn't making them. It's that they're sending them elsewhere where there's a market. So again, that question of pushing the market is really, really important. So whatever vendors you're working with, whatever contractors you're working with, really push them, start early, tell them that you're going to keep looking until you get what you need.
And corollary, I have a question. Can we get a list of your successful contacts? So you did
Yeah,
bring a list of your contractors with you. If you, another question, would you have converted to electric if you couldn't do solar panels, or would the benefits decline too much?
Yes, I personally would have, because it matters that much to me. And I really believe that the cleaner house, it just feels great to do it. And, you can buy into solar through MG&E and various things of that sort. And eventually we'll have even more renewably sourced electricity. And so it's going to work. Oh, there's one more thing I should say. Apparently resale values are going up when you have these kinds of things on your house now. So it's not like the money I put into this house, if I was going to sell it 5 years from now, I could get a much better price.
Excellent. So how many square feet is your home? And
it's 1,850.
And then when you were putting it in, did you talk with your contractor if it mattered if you had a single story or a double story? You have a double story.
I have a double story. The contractors didn't ask me about that. Really, it's just about the space you're going to heat.
And it's been our experience in multifamily with multi-story that we can electrify, a grade building or multi-story. And in fact, a lot of the new construction that's going in around here is actually all electric or using heat pumps, and that's multi-story, multifamily. So, and last question, did your backup heat kick in this week?
No, I already addressed it. Right. But I was very curious. Yeah. I was told actually by Brent that they've been putting these up in Minnesota, and some of these places have found that even at -14, the backup is not kicking in. So that's just what they're rated to. So it depends.
And your home is comfortable.
It's great. Yeah, there's no space that I'm not happy in.
Mm-hmm. And Susan, when we were planning for this, you were telling me a story about how they told you to keep your heat pumps at a certain temperature so that it's the same kind of during the day and during the night.
Right.
Maybe explain and the comfort that, for me, I'm thinking, I don't have to get up in a cold house. That sounds great.
Well, that's true. So, if you actually get an air source heat pump, the person who installs it will tell you these things. I have a 3-stage fan. I keep the fan at the middle level constantly so that the air keeps moving really smoothly, and that prevents let's go back to what it's like to drive a car. If you've got a car that shows you the energy use associated with accelerating and decelerating, that's when you use a lot of your power. Same thing with using an air source heat pump. You don't want it to be gearing up and then gearing down and gearing, because that loses efficiency. So keep that fan going all the time. And then I do change the temperature a little bit. Sometimes I'll knock it down a little bit at night, 2 or 3 degrees, and then back up. And if I'm sitting at my computer for a long time, I might knock it up a degree. But beyond that, I don't change it. Right.
Okay, excellent.
Oh, I should also mention that I have a house that has that's got vents, and so if you have a boiler, I'm not too sure, but that's a different story.
Mm-hmm. So we're almost at the end of our session, but I just wanted to ask you, Susan, any just final thoughts on for the audience, for the folks here, about your experience or on the policy side of this and how you're you're thinking about that.
Well, I would just say it's great fun, what I did. I would encourage anybody who's able to do it, to encourage the folks you know to think about it. I'd love to see the Madison, Milwaukee area really get ahead of the game on this. Electrifying everything is the future for us. And I guess I would just be delighted if everybody else would do it as fast as you can. And I really do think we should pay attention to pushing policymakers to attend to this.
So the link to Susan's blog is here. A really interesting podcast, Electrify This. And then there's a lot of really interesting YouTube videos by great organizations out there with their take on how to do this in a single family home. So check some of those out if you're interested. Susan has her contact list for contractors. So if you're interested, she has it here. And just one more call for questions before we wrap up. Yeah.
Did MD&E remove the meter? And if so, did they charge for removing the meter?
They did not, and there was no charge.
North Metro Gas wants $1,500 for me to remove the meter.
Oh dear, that's awful.
So the question was, did MG&E actually remove the meter and did they charge for it?
What size is your air source heat?
It's 3.5 ton hyperheat. And it's so, it's called a commercial 3.5 ton hyperheat pump.
It's a Mitsubishi,
Mhm.
which is 100% down to 4 degrees.
Minus 9, no, it's actually down to minus 13.
That's at 75%.
Yeah, I just love this picture because it's taken in the snow of the heat pump. So, well, great. Thank you all for being here really early this morning. And thank you, especially Susan, for sharing your story. It was such a thrill to put this together.
Well, thank you. You've been
with
great.
you. And again, check out Susan's blog. And
I'm just an individual. Abby is doing the work that's going to make a difference to a lot of people, and especially folks who are in the lower income brackets. Really, really important.
well,
Thank you.
thanks.
Right.